All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Grow Rogue podcast. Today, I'm joined by Bratuskins, the name I'm going to continually mispronounce, but he's a gracious fella, and he's going to not get mad at me for it. And before we jump in, he's in Atlanta, and when we first had our call, we connected on this because I told him, I said, that makes you in the top 2 most famous Latvian nationals here in Atlanta, because right after that had happened, right before that call, Kristaps Porzingis had just been traded to the Atlanta Hawks, and so he and I were both really stoked about that. So, Martins, great to connect with you again. Really appreciate you being on the podcast. I'm excited to talk to you today.
Thank you, Reed. It's such a pleasure to be here. And I'll take the number 2 spot in Atlanta any day after Kristaps.
Hey, it's debatable which one of you is number 1. Okay, I said you're in the top 2, so.
Okay. Then good.
We'll see if he stays healthy. You know, if he scores 0 points for the Hawks, then you can be number 1. So.
Okay, perfect. I'll try to beat him on that.
All right, yeah, awesome. Well, you know, folks who are watching this, you know, Martins he's an entrepreneur. He's a marketing guy. We focus on slightly different niches, so I'm really interested to kind of know what's going on in your world. But before we get into that, you know, I'm really interested to know your background, right? What brought you to Atlanta of all places, right? And what are you working on these days?
So I'm originally from Latvia. I grew up there, and I actually studied civil engineering in university, and I also studied in Germany for a moment in time. And for some reason, I kind of felt like, okay, I thought I love building things, so let's study something where I can build stuff, like literally build stuff. And and then after a few years, when I started working in that industry, I kind of started feeling that this might not be it after all. And then I somehow ended up into the startup space, and I remember first going to a couple of these hackathons, you know, those kind of events. At first, that was like a huge cultural shift, and I was like, wow, this whole world existed, and I had no idea. So that was a big cultural shock for me first, but then I got into startups. I had a few where literally I made all the possible mistakes, all the mistakes that are written in all the startup books. I've pretty much done them all, and then one was somewhat successful where we merged it with another company. And then my co-founder and I met, and we realized from the day one that, okay, we need to do something in the US market, because the European market is, it's nice, but it's very fragmented. And if you want to go with an existing product from one market, let's say Germany to France and then the UK and other markets, it's just actually very hard to do that. So that's why we wanted to go to the US market first. And why Atlanta is because we got accepted into Techstars. Techstars is like a big accelerator network, and they have various programs throughout the country and also globally. And we were selected to participate in the Atlanta program in Ponce City Market, and that's what brought me there.
So Ponce City Market, for those who are not familiar with the Atlanta area, so Ponce City Market used to be it was
Sears building.
The Sears building, that's right.
Yeah.
But for decades and decades, it was just an absolute, and you probably didn't even, I don't know if you saw this or knew this,
No.
Martins, but it was just, I mean, it was a complete in shambles, right? Like it was run down. I'm talking classic Gotham City look, right? Like broken windows, graffiti everywhere. And then about, I guess maybe a decade ago, maybe 10 years ago, there was this big revitalization project, and now it is this super cool, like live, work, play type of development. And it has been like this home for startups and, really large tech companies. I believe Twitter had an office there, Google has an
Yep.
office there. And so it's become this sort of hub for the startup and for the tech and for the entrepreneurship community in Atlanta. And so that sounds like it was a really neat experience. So I'm actually really curious. So you had your startup, right? And so what did it do? What do you think got you into Techstars?
Well, there was one step before Techstars actually, and we moved first. The first place in the U.S. where we went to, where we moved was Cincinnati, Ohio, out of all places. And what got us there is because we didn't have like a lot of money and funding to actually make that move, and it's relatively expensive to move like from Europe to the US and stuff like that. And we got accepted into this one like incubator program in Cincinnati. And as you can imagine, there's not like that many startup folks from Europe, and even more, even less from Latvia in Cincinnati, Ohio. So kind of like the community, everyone in the community knew about us. We were like the Latvian guys. And when the Techstars people, when the managing directors went on their scouting trips, and they obviously know people in the local communities, and they started asking, okay, we're coming to Cincinnati at this time, something. Who should we meet? And I guess a lot of people said, "Oh, you should be the Latvia guys." uh, and yeah, so I remember that first meeting when they were there and we were there. I walked out of that meeting thinking, "Okay, this did not go well." It's like somehow it did not go according to the plan that I had. But then a couple months later, after multiple interview stages, we were accepted, and that was amazing. That was a really, really good experience. And then we moved down to Atlanta.
That's really great. Yeah, I mean, sometimes like having a thing that's not an identifier. I don't like the identifier, right? I don't like, the cheesy way to say this is I don't like labels, but there is something about having like your thing, right? That just gives you an opportunity to stand out from the crowd. And I imagine there are plenty of challenges that come with, being an immigrant to the United States, and also trying to do one of the hardest things in the world, which is start a company. And
Yep.
so if those things are your challenges, then you might as well use them to your best advantage as well. So I think that's really smart. And just to talk about that for a second, I'm big on this, right? There's nothing that comes without some form of challenge. It's that whole choose your challenge thing. And so if we know we're going to have to deal with the downsides of whatever it is that we're doing, find the upsides. And then on the same token, right? If you've got this really great opportunity or this thing that you're doing, it's going to have its challenges. So make sure that we're being grateful for those challenges, right? So there's that balance there. So that's a really neat, background. So the story. So now what's going on now, right? So you went through Techstars. You're still in Atlanta, obviously. What stage is the business, and are you still involved in that original startup?
So back when we moved to Cincinnati and then to Atlanta, we had a different business model, and we actually, without going too much into the details, but it only had to do with the gaming side of things, and I'll explain what we do now in a second. But yeah, essentially we that business model, it was kind of working, but we were always, there were always barriers in scaling it up in a way that we wanted, and it was just not the speed wasn't there. We kind of were not getting where we wanted to be. So in 2022, we pivoted to this model that we have right now, and which actually nicely ties everything together back to both Cincinnati and Atlanta, and how it actually going to Cincinnati first was a blessing in disguise back then. Where what we do now, we are so Monetizr is a gaming platform for advertisers, for big brands. What we're doing is we're building the advertising infrastructure for mobile gaming channel. So if you think about it, maybe like 15, 20 years ago when social media was just emerging, there were just a couple of companies that built out all the necessary tools and infrastructure. I mean, the technical infrastructure for advertisers to come into this channel and access all these users that social media was suddenly getting. In gaming and mobile gaming, I think about iPhone, Android games mostly. That had never really happened. that build out
Mhm.
of the infrastructure, because the market was just like more fragmented. In the social media space, there are literally a couple of companies, and we all know who those companies are. But in the gaming space, it's not as clear cut. So that's why I feel like even though the attention numbers are there, the reach numbers, how many people use gaming and how often and how long, it's all very on par with social media. But the ad spend is very, very, very far off. Maybe like 5% of the ad spend of the social is going into the gaming space. And so that's what we're doing. We're creating all the tools and all the infrastructure needed for advertisers, brands to come in. And so today we work with some of the biggest advertisers in the world, like Procter and Gamble, like PepsiCo, Helion, these kind of very, very well-known companies on gaming activations. And it's why it ties back to Cincinnati very nicely is because Procter and Gamble is headquartered in Cincinnati.
Ah,
And back then when we moved there, we were like, okay, like there's a couple of these huge companies in town, and everyone knows who they are, and like a lot of our mentors from this first program are somewhat involved, some ex-alumni or something. And then years later, P&G is our biggest customer. So which is so weird how that works, but that's how it worked.
I was wondering how you're going to tie that back into Ohio. So nicely done. Yeah, no, that's really great. And so, what to me, what is interesting about that is, and I'm curious if this was the route that you went. Right? Did you see that there was that imbalance of advertisers to attention on those platforms, and then that's what made you choose that business model?
So
Or
it
did
was
that come as like
actually
a secondary thing, right? Like you went into it thinking, "Hey, this is a good idea," and then you discovered.
it was more the second thing, because
Okay.
we pivoted to this model in 20, like essentially we rebooted the company because that first thing wasn't really working, but we had built a network of the game publishers that are making all these successful games, and we had a lot of mentors and business uh, connections in both Atlanta and Cincinnati. And in 2022, too, when we were like, I remember that one specific episode when my co-founder and I were sitting literally on the street. We're like, okay, something's not working. What do we do? And then somehow we realized, okay, let's maybe go back through our notes from a couple of years ago, and because we always try to keep notes, and then let's go through our notes and let's just remind ourselves what were people telling us back then and something. And as we were doing that, we realized that a lot of our mentors from both the Techstars program and the Cincinnati program, a lot of them were somewhat related to, marketing kind of people. And one thing that really stood out in all those notes was essentially people telling us, hey, you have access to this huge amount of people, but with the current, like with the old model, we were only really capitalizing maybe like top 1 or maybe top 2% of those people.
Uh-huh.
What about how about you flip that around and
Right.
then introduce this advertising model? And I remember that back then we were like, oh, but we kind of don't like ads. It's like you don't want to be that company that makes more ads. No one likes ads. And somehow by just like brainstorming and thinking about, okay, but what if we had an opportunity to redo ads with this different channel in mind, which is very unutilized? And then we kind of realized that, maybe, just maybe, we can build a world where in the games or in the apps that we have on the platform, maybe we can introduce advertising, introduce brands in a way where the brands help you instead of just, show videos or logos
Mm-hmm.
or banners to you.
Mm-hmm.
And that was kind of like the click when things started clicking differently. And then once we went out to the market and started, doing a little bit more discovery, it was actually P&G, which was one of the first big companies who responded. And it turns out that they have a whole, innovation arm called the Future of Advertising team. And they are literally asking themselves the same question. How can we, as a global, huge, super brand, how can we invent the future? And then something just clicked. So
That
ads
is
don't have to be bad, essentially. They don't have to be bad. We can
yeah.
make a world where ads are good.
Yeah. Now that is a bold that's a bold claim, which I feel like especially every innovative or every opportunity for innovation has to be built around a bold claim, right? Otherwise, by definition, it's not particularly innovative, right? And so,
Yeah.
I mean, hats off to you for doing the hard work necessary to challenge the norm, right? Challenge what everybody was telling you was the safer way to make money. And then clearly, there was a really large brand with a lot of dollars behind it that was looking for a way to validate that same hypothesis of there's got to be we need to be prepared for a different way, right? Which is
Yeah.
impressive on both of y'all's, on both parts, right? It's impressive to know that there's such a large company is thinking with that innovative kind of an eye towards innovation. And so so I'm curious, I mean, how do you land a deal like that? What is that like, right? P&G you're right, it's a massive company. It's like Fortune 10 company. Do you just reach out and say, "Hey, we're the Latvian guys. Can we get a meeting?"
Uh, I wish.
Yeah.
I wish that's how it worked, but no. But it was through our network because I
Mm,
remember one guy that we had previously worked for, again from Cincinnati. He knew the right person to reach out to, and I did. And then, like countless of, many meetings later. And remember, that was COVID. That was like the
yeah.
height of COVID,
Mm,
so everything was in Zoom and Microsoft Teams and stuff. After many kind of like levels of due diligence from P&G's side that we're a legit company and stuff like that, we I remember we got our first pilot proposal, or pilot request from P&G, and that was for the Charmin brand. I remember when they picked the Charmin brand, I was like, "Oh shit, how are we going to do this in a way that adds value?" And like, it was. I remember the first thought was, "Wow, this is gonna be tough." But at the end of the day, we did a campaign where, how, like, for Charmin, one of the things that they wanted to promote was their Charmin Strong product line,
mhm,
and Charmin Strong is 2 times stronger than other toilet papers. So what we did is we worked together with a one of our gaming partners that we had already a relationship with, and they had a game called Hole IO, which is about basically holes where you start with a small hole and then you go through the city and then you eat stuff like small items first, and then eventually with everything that you eat, like the hole gets bigger and then you can swallow whole buildings and stuff. And essentially the thing was with Charmin, if you engage with the ad, you would be able to get 2 times stronger in the game. So mimicking kind of like
mhm.
Charmin strong, 2 times stronger, game 2 times stronger. And also about that whole content was very well matching with the brand, and they loved it. They loved it, and it performed very well. And then the next year, I think we got way, I think, 7 additional P&G campaigns and stuff. And then with that validation, we started going after others, and it's definitely not easy. Even if you have a validation from a big player like that, it's
Yeah.
there's always going to be someone who says, okay, but this is a small scale thing. How
Yeah.
can we make sure that this works at 100x or 1000x scale? And that's a tough question to answer. So you kind of have to go step by step and make it a little bit bigger, make it a little bit bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and just being consistent, show consistent results, be easy to work with, and that's basically it.
So what I think is what I think is really interesting about this, and something now we're talking about what people can take away from this, right? Is that you guys couldn't have just put out, I would imagine, you couldn't have just put out to 10,000 potential advertisers the same message with the same opportunity, right? This had to be a very specific, like what you're offering is an innovative advertising opportunity, but each one of those, I mean, that 2X Charmin Strong concept would not have worked, right? Without those two
Yeah.
things being the game platform and that particular product and that firm, right? So you're almost having to do pre-strategy when you find the opportunity. I suppose it was a little bit after that, but then you've got to pitch, right? So it's very much like in, say, an ad agency, but it's got to be developed, right? That has to be done.
Yeah.
So you've got to have knowledge and the skill and the partners on the gaming development side. So this is a really complex sale, right? Getting a new client for you guys is not something that can happen overnight. Is that fair to say?
I think in that time, yes, it was a very, I would say, a pretty custom kind of a thing.
Yeah.
But over the next couple of years, what we did is as we were working with more and more P&G brands, as we were also, okay, there was validation for us. Okay, that there are big companies out there that are willing to take a risk on this new channel and this new approach. So by working with many of these different brand partners and being really relatively close to them, meaning that getting feedback and getting constant like inputs from them, doing campaigns, seeing what works, what doesn't work, we iterated the whole approach to a point where now we can actually we have simplified it to a point where it doesn't take all these creative agency type of decisions to actually activate a campaign. So it's essentially now in order for us to activate a campaign, the only things that we need from the brand is usually the minimum is a logo, a video asset, and then we have various like additional assets that we can use for the interactive elements. But that's something that we do on our side, and that's very easy for the brand. That at that first time, it wasn't easy for the brand.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah.
It took a lot of business decisions on their side to make this happen. But over the years, essentially, what we've done is we've simplified, while figuring out what is the essence. And what we've learned is that what these brands and what our customers care about, they care about attention. How and what attention means, for how many seconds did the user interact with my advertisement or my branded experience. And if you look at industry studies about attention, most social media sites have maybe 3, maybe 5 second attention with a typical ad. In gaming, we have at least 37 seconds. So 37 is like the bottom benchmark, which is a magnitude more than what is available on social media generally. And when we do these, first of all, so attention is the thing that we have figured out how to focus on and how to optimize for. And then once we then do brand lift studies and sales lift studies, we do see that longer attention with the brand and the product does result in a higher brand favorability, higher purchase intent, sales lift, things like that.
Okay, and so talk to me, if you would, about the process from, well, number one, let's go one at a time if we can, because I think this can be something very tactical that the audience takes away. Because what I want to get at is the process from, new opportunity identification, meaning a new client opportunity for you guys, all the way through deployment, and then that ongoing, retention strategy with the client. But starting in the beginning, I mean, what are you guys doing to grow right now outside of, the conversations that you're having through your network?
Yeah, and that's always a work in progress. I just should add that.
Yeah.
But generally, I think there's a lot of education needed in the space about who the gaming audiences are, about how does how do the formats work, how they differ from what's out there already, how can you like more operationally, how do you activate in gaming? So all of these steps are kind of potential blockers that we have to address one by one and with different stakeholders. So what we are doing is we're obviously we're trying to use every possible campaign that we have to make a great case study out of. We're then using that as a proof. Hey, this does work in this category. We always do brand lift studies, even if if it means that we have to finance them ourselves sometimes. But it's super valuable for us to create that additional validation for the customer that hey, this does work. And I mean, I would say that yeah, it's kind of creating different materials, educational materials around the ecosystem, around case studies, and about best practices. So how does that all thing work? And then this industry is a lot about it's a big industry, but it's also very tight, I would say.
Yeah.
And people talk. People go to so many different conferences throughout the year. People talk there. They share what works, what doesn't, and we're also there. We're trying
Right.
to be a part of those conversations, and that's why we're going to Cannes Festival. That's why we're going to Possible in Miami and other like smaller events as well. It's just it's a big networking kind of game, I feel like.
Yeah. Okay, so networking is huge, and then it sounds like so you're making basically, lead magnets and premium assets for brands. Those marketing teams are probably looking for that kind of information. They go download it, they become a lead with you guys, and then they're getting into what I would imagine is like a lead nurture sequence.
Yep, yep. And
Good.
that's we're always trying to figure out how to then get. So, like in our lead nurture sequence, there everyone knows who we are, which is good, right? It's not like it's coming from a random
Mhm.
person. And then essentially, yeah, we're right now what we're doing is we're really working a lot on personalization, on really figuring out who am I sending this to, why this person might find it valuable. And then it also really differs from market to market. Let's say about events. Like later
Yeah.
in September, I'm going to the Mexico, which is an event in Germany. So, and not that many Americans go there. So again, you have to kind of figure out who do you invite and who do you talk to about this event versus another US event. So
Right.
it's very personalized.
No, that makes sense. Yeah. So you're creating a hit list, basically, who's going to be at this event? Who do I need to make sure that I meet? Is that those it maybe even reaching out to people ahead of time, like, hey, we're going to be at the same
Of
event.
course,
You want to grab coffee while you're there?
of course. I think the trick here is in order to really work with these big guys in the industry, you have to meet in person. I don't see how, at least with these kind of accounts, I don't see how this could be done all remotely.
Right.
Maybe at some point when we like in the longer term, what we want to do is we want to also create a self-serve platform,
Yep.
just
Yep.
like Facebook or some other big platforms where technically anyone could start working with us, and then that could open up doors to smaller agencies, smaller brands, and that's how we think about potentially expanding to those categories. And then e-commerce, of course, that's a huge other box that we want to open. But generally, yeah, right now it's a lot of networking and yeah, network nurturing.
Yeah. Well, okay, so if I could give a couple of takeaways that I'm learning, and you tell me if I've got this, correct or incorrect. But if you're watching this and you want to know, okay, what can I learn from Martin's growth strategy? The first thing I'm hearing is that the network is everything. If you are not being intentional about your networking strategy, then you're just leaving it up to chance, right? If I'm just going to a random event hoping to meet somebody there that might introduce me to somebody that might be a decision maker for a business that I can work with, that is not a solid strategy. Instead, be intentional about the events and the networking opportunities that you choose to be a part of. Know who's going to be there to the best of your ability, and then make a specific plan for how to engage those individuals. That's the first thing I'm hearing. The second thing is the digital strategy that supports it. There's got to be credibility there when you do make that contact. Now, you've got the credibility of kind of having established in the industry, but assuming somebody doesn't have that there, then because exactly what they're going to do after they meet you, no matter how impressive you are in person, is they're gonna Google you, they're going to look up your business, and you want to make sure that when they find that, it confirms in their minds that this business is legit, this person is legit and authoritative and knowledgeable and credible. And then if they can go deeper into learning about your business, and they can get on your email list, for example, something that we just preach is find a way to get them onto a regular newsletter, then you've not only established a start of a relationship, but you've created a scalable way to nurture that relationship over time until there's an actual opportunity to pursue. So those are two big takeaways that I got from what you just described. Would you edit or adjust that in any way?
Well, spot on. The only thing I would add to the second one, at least in our space, the sales cycles tend to be very long. So that's that second thing about the network nurturing and the regular cadence and things. It's not that someone just is unqualified, or it's not like someone is not willing to do business with you or something. But more often than not, they also, in their own companies, you have to really think about what that person needs to do internally in order for you to be successful with that person, right? How do you make them successful? And
Yes.
and it doesn't matter how much you want this to work out, but that person needs to do a lot of work. So in order for you to make their lives easier, there's it just sometimes it takes time. You have to, and that's why I'm mentioning about this very personalized approach. Every company is slightly different, and some like what the decision making process looks like. All those questions that you can probably you're not going to get answers to all those questions in a first conversation. So it will take some time, some relationship. And then after a while, you really see the difference between the people who see the future, who see the vision, and you share that vision, and they're willing to really work with you on achieving that vision. And then there will be those who are just like, not willing to really risk anything. So you have to identify those champions and then really be very personal and really, really help as much as possible to make this happen. And you will be rewarded. They will be rewarded. Everyone will win if you kind of find a way to make this work. But it's not going to be a very quick process, at least in our segment. It's going to sometimes take months, maybe a year, maybe more.
Yeah.
So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah. No, that's absolutely right. I mean, and this is something that I would say that your average, run of the mill marketing or sales individual really struggles to grasp is that it's the length of the sales cycle for meaningful products and services. And I mean meaningful in terms of the size, right? Not that it doesn't mean something if it's a smaller transaction, but if you are, and we make the joke a lot, the best way to make a lot of money is to sell expensive stuff to people with big budgets. But the thing is that if there's big budgets and if you're selling expensive stuff, it's not something that you're going to get a yes and a check written on day one. I love the way that you even refer to them as, champions, identifying those champions. And I really think it's valuable that you've emphasized that you've got to show them how they win out of this, because it's not just the business. It's not just the product. It is that individual at that business who's putting their reputation on the line and they're investing their time into you, essentially, right? Because if you've persuaded them that your product is going to help their business and they stand to benefit because they're the ones that are bringing this and they're the ones that are making this happen, then they've got to really believe that is true. And so identify your champions, make it clear to them how they win, and then nurture over a probably longer period of time than you think you're
Yeah.
going to have to.
100%. Yes.
Yeah. This is great. Martins, I wish I could extract as much of your brain as you would be willing to give me, but I know I want to be respectful of your time. What are you working on now that you want our audience to know about? Is there something you want them to go see? Do you have a newsletter you want them to go subscribe to? Please tell us how we can follow you and we can learn more about what you guys are doing at Monetizr.
Well, the best two best ways are obviously our website, which we're always keeping up to date with all the new stuff. And I personally post quite a lot of stuff and learnings on LinkedIn. So please feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. So and there's also like a LinkedIn newsletter there, which is where I post a lot of stuff. So that's that. That's how you can follow me and the company Monetizr. And I feel like really, like personally, I'm very excited about this new feature that we're working on. And I just wanted to share a little bit. Again, coming back to the place where ads can be good, and trying to make this a reality. You know how when I've been going to Cannes Festival, which is like where most of the leadership people from all the major brands and agencies come to every single year. And for many years, a lot of people in the leadership positions have been always asking, okay, how do we create a relationship with our consumers, right? Like, how do we, as a brand, how do we speak to them in a ways that they understand, and how do we stay cool, and how do we, make it a two-way street versus a one-way street? Because most ads are literally like one-way street, right? There's no feedback loop. And what I'm very excited about is something that we're working on right now with a couple of brands, but they're not public yet, so I can't speak about their names. But everyone's talking about AI, and how can we essentially create an experience with the brand, with a brand character, or a brand influencer, or a celebrity, or a mascot, or something like, imagine in a game where you can actually speak and interact with celebrities or brand mascots, or ask them questions, have a conversation, play some games with them. Of course, AI versions of them. So this is an area where I really see how advertising and branded experiences can kind of merge. And when finally, for the first time ever, really, it can become a two-way street where you, as a consumer, you really interact with the brand. And yes, it's AI. Obviously, it's not going to be, if you're working with if a celebrity is working with a brand, it's not like, they're not going to be always chatting with you. I mean, maybe they will, but it's not going to be that always. But those experiences that we have built and already are testing, they feel different. Where you initiate like a relationship with a company, you can learn about them, you can learn about their mission, right? Sometimes on the surface level, we don't think about all the projects and initiatives that these big companies have also in progress, right? Whether there are some environmental initiatives that you might care about, or any kind of initiative. And if we can tie that together with this real conversation, which is technically an ad, but that's actually a conversation, I think that might be very powerful. And finally, this two-way street and this brand consumer relationship can really be taken to the next level. I am very excited about that.
That is super interesting. Yeah, I mean, if you think about the time engaged with a brand as a metric for the effectiveness that an ad is having, then if you can create a conversational experience, then that's probably the strongest method, even more so than, say, like video, right? Which we know has like really strong engagement rates versus, a standalone, social media post or an ad or something like that. But a conversation really keeps a person engaged much longer and fully engaged, right? Because there's back and forth in that interaction, as opposed to one way and then consuming and creating. So that is super interesting. I'm really curious to see how that
Yeah.
develops and what you guys are able to do with that.
Imagine like there's one particular case that we're currently working on is not only like conversational, but co-creation, where
Ah,
there's
yeah.
this one brand that is working with a very famous musician. And essentially, imagine you being able to work on a custom version of their song, which is about
Yeah.
you. You know, like you give them prompts. Based on your conversation, you can create a song which is AI generated, but it's kind of a version of that original song, so everyone will recognize it. But at the same time, you feel like I kind of created it together with this AI, but I created it. And imagine things like these where not as a part of that brand engagement, you not only learn something about that company, but you get something that is somehow it feels like you made it. It's your
Right.
co-creation with the brand. And then imagine that power where you start sharing it around and you tell your friends. It just opens up. I feel like it opens up a whole big new universe of opportunities that have not really been available before. Maybe they have been available in like small cases where like there's an event and then a brand sponsors something. You go there, I don't know, you co-create something, and it's a very localized. But imagine for the first time ever being able to scale that, really scale that. I'm very bullish and excited about this.
No, I mean that is really exciting. That's super interesting too. So I love the concept that you present of like a custom song because that is like, and this could spin off into a whole separate conversation, which I would love to have, and think we could definitely do. But it's creators and artists and the personalization of experiences, and I think through something like that is probably the strongest way to do it. Because for I don't know 150 years, the only way to really have a personalized experience with an artist or a celebrity of some sort is meeting them, right? Which that's sort of an underwhelming concept, especially at scale, right? Because we've all seen that, the meet and greets and stuff like that with artists where it's like you might shake their hand, they might say something nice to you, but it's just really nearly impossible to scale. But if there's a co-creational aspect to it where I feel like, hey, I have this like one of one, song, right, that I made with my favorite artist, that would be a really fascinating thing because it allows you to increase the spread and the distribution of that artist, but in a million different unique and specific and interesting ways. So that is a really neat thing that I am curious to see. This is the reason why I think guys like you, you're just why the world needs you, because we're just wired differently, right? To think about not how is the world today, but what is in what ways is the world going to change, and then how do we make sure that we are there and ready and prepared for that, even if it doesn't go exactly the way that we expect it to go, right? Because everything we just talked about, it might look like that. It might look like a little different than that. But it's like, can one adapt and then immediately like jump on to where that road is headed? So I think that's really fun and interesting, and I'm excited to see where all of that goes. And Martins, I'm really glad that we've gotten to know each other a little bit because I want to be able to kind of engage with you as those things are happening. So we're definitely going to try to get you back on the show. Hopefully, we can do one in person one of these days because we're not that far from each other.
Yeah.
As long as you stay here in the Atlanta area. But I do want to thank you for being on the show today. And I want to thank everybody else for joining us. All those links that Martin's mentioned are going to be in the description there on YouTube. So if you are watching on YouTube, please make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel so that you get updates whenever there are new episodes. And then if you're on LinkedIn, like Martin's and I are, please make sure that you're following him and that you check out his newsletter. And please do the same thing for myself and for the Grow Rogue newsletter. I really appreciate everybody for joining or for watching, and I really appreciate you, Martins, for joining me on this episode.
Yep. Thank you, Reed, for having me. It was an absolute pleasure. And yeah, I am very excited about the future and would love to be back here with some updates and news after some time. So yeah, let's do it for sure.
Perfect.